industry, I'm known as Caroline Snow. I'm an aspiring singer and actress.
Where do you live, Miss Hyde?
I live in Midland City, Midlands. It's not exactly bright lights and Broadway, but it's a really nice place.
Well, what do you do in Midlands?
I'm the executive assistant to Avery Bancroft. He owns a casino in Midlands, and he's the black bear, excuse me.
How did you end up with a job like that?
Well, when I graduated from college, I moved to Vegas to pursue my career as an actress and a singer. However, I quickly realized I needed something a little more stable while I was waiting for my career to really take off.
As Mr. Bancroft's executive assistant, what are some of the tasks you handle on a daily basis?
Well, I'm responsible for managing his calendar, answering phones, scheduling meetings. Honestly, there isn't much that happens in his office without my help.
You mentioned scheduling meetings. Do you ever have to interact with anyone that you set up meetings with for your boss?
Of course, because I make arrangements with people, I call them, and sometimes people even call me. That's actually how I met Mickey Keenan.
Who is Mickey Keenan?
I thought Mickey Keenan was an auditor of the Gambling Commission. At least that's what he said whenever he called requesting a meeting with me.
Did you meet with Mr. Keenan?
Yes, I did. I thought it would be a good opportunity to share details from the proposal with someone on the Gambling Commission. I wanted to please my boss.
Did anything happen at this meeting this time?
Yes. Whenever I arrived at his office, we began discussing details from the proposal that Mr. Bancroft and I were in the midst of preparing. But then the meeting's tone sort of changed. He put his badge on the desk and revealed that he wasn't really with the Gambling Commission. He was actually an undercover cop.
Once you found out that Mr. Keenan was an undercover cop, what happened?
He enlisted my help. He wanted me to act as an informant for him. My job would be to set up meetings between Mr. Bancroft, my boss, and Miss Covington.
Who is Miss Covington?
Oh, Miss Covington is the commissioner of the Gambling Commission in Midlands. She also gambles with the Black Bear.
Would it have been unusual for you to set up meetings between Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington?
No, it's not uncommon for me to set up a meeting between the commissioner, Miss Covington, and Mr. Bancroft here in the casino.
Once you began working under Mickey Keenan, did you set up any meetings between Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington?
Yes, I did. The first meeting that I set up was for April 13th, 2015.
Could you describe this meeting for the court?
Of course. So we all entered into the room, we began discussing details from the proposal once again, but then, of course, the tone of the meeting changed again with Mickey Keenan. He started glaring at Mr. Bancroft, and then Mr. Bancroft asked Miss Covington what he could do for her.
How did Miss Covington react when Mr. Bancroft asked what he could do for her?
She just continued discussing details of the proposal. Something about the amount of conference space, she was oblivious.
Well, were any other topics of conversation brought up in this meeting?
Yes. Both Mr. Bancroft and Mickey Keenan kept making implications of a bribe to Miss Covington.
How did Miss Covington respond to that?
After she sort of caught on to what they were doing, she raised her voice. Visibly, she was upset. She was definitely uncomfortable.
Did you set up any other meetings between Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington under Mickey Keenan's direction?
Yes. I was instructed to set up a meeting for April 16th, 2015 at 12 p.m.
Did you work on April 16th?
Yes, I did. That morning, I actually went in to see my boss, Mr. Bancroft, and he was putting money into a briefcase.
When you entered the room, how did Mr. Bancroft react?
He didn't really have much of a reaction at all. He just continued putting money into the new briefcase.
Once Mr. Bancroft had finished putting money in the briefcase, what happened?
Then, both of us walked together to the meeting that I set up.
Who was supposed to be attending this meeting?
Myself, Mr. Bancroft, Mickey Keenan, and Miss Covington.
When did Miss Covington arrive to this meeting?
That's the weird part. She never showed up. And in all the meetings that I've set up with Miss Covington, she's always extremely punctual. She treats a meeting the way I treat a Broadway show, always there at least 20 minutes early.
Did you see Miss Covington on April 16th?
No, I didn't.
Did you you ever speak with Ms. Covington on April 16th?
No.
Did you ever see Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington meet on this day?
No, she never came to the meeting I set up.
Thank you, Ms. Hyde. No further questions. Ross?
Yes, sir. May I proceed?
You did?
On April 5th, you called the defendant's office.
On April 5th?
Yes.
Yes, I did.
Now, when you called the defendant's office, the defendant answered.
Yes, she did.
Usually her assistant answers.
Most of the time, yes.
And when the defendant answered the phone, she stated, Bancroft, I thought I would be hearing from you.
She did state that.
This surprised you.
It was a little bit shocking, but Mr. Bancroft is definitely someone who's very proactive.
Well, you didn't even know the defendant and Mr. Bancroft were talking at all at this point.
I didn't know that they were talking recently, but we met with Ms. Covington before.
And you said almost nothing goes on in the defendant's office without your help.
Pretty rarely, not always, but generally I know what's up.
Now, when you were on this phone call, you scheduled a meeting for April 13th.
Yes, I did.
There was a security screening for this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
You were patted down.
Yes, I was patted down, my cell phone was taken, anything I could write with. It was a pretty top secret meeting. I mean, it was a very competitive proposal.
It's simply yes or no would work. You were patted down.
Yes, I was patted down.
This never happened before.
Not in a few years that I've been working for Mr. Bancroft, no.
So you're saying this has happened before?
No, it's never happened in the few years that I've been working for Mr. Bancroft.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said in the past few years. My misunderstanding. And as you stated, your phones were also confiscated.
Yes.
This never happened before.
No, it hasn't.
And this was also the same meeting that the defendant was offered 100,000 reasons to vote for Avery Bancroft's proposal.
Are you asking if that was stated?
Yes, was that stated in this meeting?
Yes.
Now, there was another meeting following this, or at least supposed to be.
The meeting that I set up for April 16th.
Yes. And as you stated before the meeting, you went to your boss's office,
Yes, I did.
and he was stuffing a briefcase with money.
Yes, he was.
When you questioned him about it, he said, you were in too deep.
Yes.
And he also stated, there is no turning back now.
Mr. Bancroft did say that.
Now, after these statements, you guys headed off to where the meeting was supposed to take place.
Yes, we went there, but of course things didn't turn out the way that we planned.
And after waiting for a little while, your boss got impatient and left.
Yes, he did.
And after that point, you didn't see Mr. Bancroft or the defendant at all.
No, I didn't see Mr. Bancroft or Ms. Covington.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
None, Your Honor. We simply ask that this witness be allowed to step down.
Thank you.
Let's call the next witness.
Your Honor, the defense calls Mr. Lorian to the stand. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, my name is J.D. Lawrence.
What do you do for a living, Mr. Lorian?
I'm the owner and chief auditor of Gridworth Strategies, a consulting firm for various government agencies and police departments.
What's your educational background?
I received my undergraduate degree in applied mathematics from Johns Hopkins University. Then I went to law school at the University of Virginia, and then I got my LLM from Harvard.
Do you have any articles published in your field?
I have written over a dozen articles related to criminal justice and legal profession.
So now, let's move on to this case. Why were you retained in this case?
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Your Honor, we're just simply establishing the background, starting to understand why Mr. Lorien, what his role is in this case and why he's even here.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Lorien, what's your purpose in today's case?
I was retained for two primary reasons. One, to look into the arrest of one Chase Covington, and also to look at the qualifications of Officer Mickey Keenan, the lead investigator.
What facts and data did you rely on to look into this investigation?
I have the affidavits and reports of various individuals involved in the case, email exchanges between the key individuals, as well as access to public records.
Was this enough to look into this investigation?
Absolutely, this is the amount of evidence that I need to rely on.
Objection relevance. Today's case is purely about Miss Covington accepting a bribe. Dr. Lorien has nothing to do with. Mr. Lorien can only testify to the MSPD's police protocol and cannot testify to whether or not Miss Covington accepted a bribe or not.
What was the objection?
Your Honor, I simply asked him what materials he had to rely on this investigation.
I think the objection is unfounded.
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Lorien, what materials did you rely on to conduct this investigation?
Like I just said, I used some affidavits and reports that were made available for various individuals involved in the case, as well as email exchanges between Ms. Covington, Mr. Bancroft, Corey Hyde, and as well as records from MSPD.
Was this enough to look into this investigation?
Yes, it's the amount of evidence that I normally use.
Did you apply any
Objection. Your Honor, now I'd like to renew my relevance objection to the fact that Mr. Lorien cannot testify to whether or not Ms. Covington did in fact accept a bribe. Mr. Lorien, if I may proffer, Mr. Lorien can only testify to the MSPD's police protocol.
What was the statement made by the witness?
Your Honor, I was asking the witness if this was if he applied any reliable principles or methods to look into this investigation, just going to establish the witness's background and establishing his expertise. I'm not asking him to testify to this investigation just yet.
So, the witness is only testifying at this point to what his qualifications are. If you believe that he's going to elicit any conclusions that you think are outside of that expertise or that he's not qualified to testify to, please renew your objection when they get to those conclusions specifically so that the jury doesn't hear them. But at this time, I think it's premature.
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Lorien, did you apply any reliable principles and methods to this investigation?
Yes, I use methods that are common practice in the field of auditing throughout the United States.
So, what was the purpose of the audit that you did?
Well, I not only conducted an audit for this specific case, I also conducted an audit a few years ago into MSPD, and I used that audit as a benchmark for my work here today in court.
What did this audit show you?
This audit showed us how MSPD was lacking in its practices.
Are there certain areas of criteria that you look at when conducting this audit?
Yes, there are three areas that we look at. We look at approval, training,
Objection.
and supervision.
Relevance. I would now like to renew my objection.
I don't believe he's eliciting any conclusions. He's simply listing what it is that he looks at when conducting an investigation. He's not talking about the specific case and his findings here yet. So it's still a bit premature.
Well, he is talking about the 2014 audit, and 2014 audit specifies only to the police protocol and the failings of the MSPD. That has no relevance in today's case about Detective Keenan and his investigation.
The specific question was, what do you normally do when conducting an investigation?
Correct. I asked Mr. Lorien, what are the three areas of concerns that he looks at when conducting this audit?
So this question specifically is very general. When it is applied specifically, he starts testifying to specific conclusions or information that we have about this case. If you believe that it is inappropriate for his expertise, renew it then.
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Lorien, what are the three areas that you look at when looking at this audit?
Again, we look at approval, training, and supervision.
Let's take these one at a time. What do you look at under approval?
For approval, there are two levels that need to be obtained before you start any sort of major undercover operation. The first of which is approval from someone inside your police department, and the second of which is from either the state attorney's office or district attorney's office, depending on
Did the Midland State Police Department follow the guidelines for approval?
While there was some minimal level of approval obtained in regards to the officer's chain of command inside the police department, there was no approval obtained from the district attorney's office.
Let's move on to the second topic, supervision. What do you look at when looking at supervision?
When an undercover officer goes into the field, usually they have to submit some type of documented paperwork in regards to the progress of how their investigation is going, and that allows the supervisor to properly make sure that they're following protocols and see if they need to potentially extend or shorten the specific assignment.
Did the Midland State Police Department follow the guidelines on supervision?
I couldn't find any documentation supporting that they did.
Let's move on to this third area, training. What do you look at when analyzing that area?
When an officer is going into a major undercover operation, they need to make sure that they have the proper training before beginning doing so. This involves specialized training and how to handle otherwise illegal activity, actions that can occur during an undercover operation that are outside the scope of what the department is looking for, and also how to properly handle informants and how to properly talk to individuals.
Did the Midland State Police Department follow the guidelines on training?
Outside of graduating from the Midland State Police Academy, I couldn't see any documentation or supporting evidence of Officer Keenan attending any type of specialized training.
Dr. Lauren, based on your expertise, what does it mean that the Midland State Police Department failing to follow all of these guidelines?
It means that the fact that they failed to follow all of these guidelines, which are standardized for undercover operations, it means that we really have to look closely at the evidence that the police department is bringing into today's case.
Yes, now that Mr. Lorian has in fact made a conclusion, I would like to renew my relevance objection.
Okay, give me the grounds for your relevance. Give us a little bit more background.
Today's case is purely about Ms. Covington and the bribe that Ms. Covington accepted. Mr. Lorian is testifying to Detective Keenan and whether or not the police protocols of the MSPB and the training of Detective Keenan. Mr. Lorian's findings have no relevance in today's case because they are purely about a bribe today.
Your response?
Your Honor, I completely agree with Mr. LaRochelle that Mr. Lauren is analyzing the investigation done by Detective Keenan. And prosecution, they called Detective Keenan before you today. They talked about this investigation. And as a defense, we're allowed to delve into this investigation, see whether or not it was conducted in a proper manner or a faulty manner. That's simply what we're doing today.
Counsel, do you think it's not relevant whether or not the investigation was done properly as to how reliable the detective's findings are or the reliability of the evidence that they've got?
I think that the prosecution has proved its case through the witnesses that we have called today, that it is in fact that today's case is purely about Ms. Covington accepting a bribe. Mr. Lorian's findings on Detective Keenan's training have no relevance to today's case.
Your objection is noted and on the record for the purposes of appeal. I think that this witness, his testimony, as long as it stays to the reliability of Detective Keenan and the investigation itself, goes to the reliability and credibility of another witness and is therefore relevant. If they go beyond that, please feel free to renew your objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Dr. Lorian, what does the Midland State Police Department failing to follow all of these guidelines mean to you?
Like I said, it means that when we go to draw any sort of conclusions or interpret any of the information they brought us today, we need to really think about it twice before accepting those conclusions.
Thank you, Dr. Lorian. No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Lorian.
Good evening.
You were retained by the defense.
Yes,
The defense provided you with documents.
they did provide me with some documents.
You're also being compensated by the defense today.
Yes.
In fact, you're charging $500 an hour.
Yes, that's a standard rate for auditing in the United States.
You're also billing 40 hours.
If I remember correctly, yes.
And for today's testimony, you will also receive $10,000 from the defense.
I've already received that money, yes.
After everything's said and done, you will have received $30,000 from the defense.
I believe so, correct.
Now, you own Greylord Strategies.
Yes, I founded Greylord Strategies Company after I did a stint with the FBI for over a decade in their white collar crime division, and decided that this would be another way to continue my service into white collar crime.
So that's a yes, that you do in fact own Greylord Strategies.
Yes.
And you don't have a boss.
Well, as the owner, I'm the boss.
So you don't have a boss to report to at all.
Not inside Greylord Strategies, no.
So you can pretty much do whatever you want.
No, I cannot do whatever I want.
Well, as the boss, you don't have anyone to report to.
That doesn't mean I can do whatever I want.
I'll move on to the MSPD. Now, just because there is no strict training just because there's no written documents for training of Detective Keenan, doesn't mean there isn't any.
The state would have to have documented training if each officer has gone through the department. That way we can track who's qualified to handle what types of gear and participate in what types of operations.
But just because there isn't any doesn't mean that there is in fact no training for Detective Keenan.
There's no approved training that he went through, at least.
Now, these guidelines that you testified to are just guidelines, correct?
They're called the Undercover Guidelines as published by the U.S. Attorney General's Office. Midland State Police Department back in 2010 said that they were going to adopt these guidelines into their own department to use for their own practices. When I conducted my 2014 audit, I found that they were not really meeting any of these requirements whatsoever. When I re-examined them for today's case, that was also the case.
But these guidelines are just guidelines, correct?
They're guidelines that are published by the U.S. Attorney General's Office. However, the MSPD said that they're going to adopt these as their own policies back in 2010. So they're not really guidelines anymore so much as department policies.
But there is no actual rule stating that they have to follow these guidelines.
Yes, there is, because they adopted them as their own department policies.
Just because they've adopted them doesn't mean that they are obligated to follow them.
Yes, it does.
And is your testimony today that they do have to follow these guidelines?
When a department adopts guidelines, that means that they are taking them apart as their own policy. Therefore, they should probably follow their own policy.
Your Honor, may I have a moment?
You may.
Your Honor, I'll move on. Mr. Loring, you're not qualified to collect evidence.
No, I'm not qualified to go out in the field like a crime scene investigator and collect evidence.
In fact, you're not even qualified to collect evidence at all.
As I just said, no, I'm not a qualified crime scene investigator.
In today's case, you found that the MSPD did not, in fact, collect the evidence that they collected following all guidelines, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase that question?
In today's case, the MSPD followed all proper protocols when it comes to collecting evidence.
I could not find any errors in their evidence collection because there was fairly new documentation.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Do you have any redirect to this?
No redirect, Your Honor. Excused.
Excuse.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do you have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, at this time, the defense would like to call Allie Thomas to the stand.
Thomas, you're under oath.
May I proceed?
You may.
Good evening. Could you introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, my name's Allie Thomas.
Where are you from, Miss Thomas?
I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, but I've been in the Midlands for a while now.
And what do you do for a living in Midlands?
I'm actually a dealer at the Black Bear Casino. Best blackjack dealer around.
How long have you worked at the Black Bear Casino?
I few years now. I used to work at Joey Dean's club, Peaches, but then I switched to the Black Bear.
How often do you work at the Black Bear?
Pretty much every day. I'm one of the more seasoned dealers, so I tend to deal every day and in the VIP room where the high rollers are.
Could you describe the clientele of the VIP room a little more?
Well, like I said, it's the high rollers, so people that got a lot of money to spend. Usually politicians and celebrities, too.
Do you ever see Avery Bancroft in the VIP room?
Yeah, I do. Mr. Bancroft is usually playing games with the guests, mingling with them, make sure they're having a good time.
Did you ever see Miss Covington, Jace Covington, in the VIP room?
Yeah, I did. She gambled pretty frequently.
How successful did Miss Covington appear to be?
I've seen her win some pretty big hands. On April 6th, I think, I wasn't dealing at her table, but there was so much yelling and she practically skipping away from the table. She must have won real big that day.
When was the last time you saw Miss Covington at the Black Bear?
April 16th, 2015.
Could you describe what you saw?
She actually came to meet Mr. Bancroft at my blackjack table. I kind of noticed them right away because Mr. Bancroft's my boss, and they were both carrying briefcases.
Why would you notice that they had briefcases?
It's usually odd to carry briefcases in the VIP room, so it was kind of odd that I saw two that day.
Could you describe these briefcases?
Black, two gold latches. Couldn't really tell the difference, and then they put them under the chair.
Once Mr. Bancroft and Miss Covington sat down at your table, what happened?
They just played a few hands of blackjack. I know people are saying that they switched the briefcases or something, but I don't think either of them can make a clean switch off.
Did you see any sort of briefcase switching?
No, I didn't. And I mean, so as a dealer at the Black Bear, you gotta watch people's hands. Make sure there's no cheating going on. If they switch briefcases, I would have seen it.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. No further questions.
Is there a cost for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Thomas. You're an expert dealer at the Black Bear Casino, correct?
Yeah, I'm one of the more seasoned dealers.
You're familiar with the defendant.
Yeah, Chase Covington.
You were working on April 16, 2015.
Yeah, I was dealing at the blackjack table right in front of the fountain. It's actually my favorite because the fountain noise is so much better than the roar of the subway.
Around 2 p.m., you saw your boss, Avery Bancroft, come in, right?
Yeah, he came to sit down at my blackjack table.
Avery Bancroft was carrying a briefcase.
Yeah.
Later, the defendant walked in, correct?
Yeah, Chase Covington came later.
Also carrying a briefcase.
Yeah, like I said, it was a little strange, but maybe they come from a business meeting or something. I don't know.
It wasn't just strange. You've never seen Avery Bancroft or Chase Covington carry a briefcase.
No, I haven't. Usually people don't bring briefcases into the VIP room. They usually come to gamble, but they may have just gone into a business meeting or something like that.
Now, you have never seen anyone carry a briefcase in the VIP room, correct?
No, like I said, usually people go in there to gamble.
Now, Ms. Thomas, do you have the ability to see through tables?
No.
So you don't know what was happening underneath your blackjack table?
Well, no, but like I said, as a dealer, you gotta watch people's hands. Make sure there's no cheating going on. At the Black Bear, players are required to gesture with their hands. Like at blackjack, they gotta tap the table to hit for another card, or wave to stop getting cards. So I'm watching people's hands all the time.
Ms. Thomas, I know that you're very excited to talk today in court, but my question to elicit a very simple yes or no answer. Did you see what was happening underneath your blackjack table?
No, like I said.
Then you didn't see the briefcases.
No, I didn't see them under the table.
So you have no idea what the defendant was doing underneath the blackjack table.
No, but like I said earlier, neither one of them can make a clean switch off. And trust me, I'm a seasoned blackjack dealer. I always know to watch people's hands. I always know to make sure people are cheating. I would have seen something.
But you could only see them from the waist up.
Yes, they were sitting in chairs.
So for all you know, the defendant could have moved the briefcase with her foot and you wouldn't have noticed.
Well, I mean, the chairs aren't that close together at the blackjack table. You don't want to be touching somebody you don't know next to you. So, I mean, I guess they could have, but I probably would have seen that too.
And after only 20 minutes, the defendant picked up the briefcase and left the VIP room.
Yes, she played a few hands and then.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Redirect this witness.
No, Your Honor, we simply ask that this witness be allowed to step down.
Ms. Collins, you're accused. Defense, a mysterious Covington here.
Yes, Your Honor, she has, and the defense called her to stand.
All right.
May I proceed?
Next.
Please state your name for the court.
Good evening, my name is Charlotte Covington.
Mrs. Covington, where do you live?
I live here in Midlands, off of Links Road at 8720.
What do you do for a living?
I'm currently the chair of the Midlands Gambling Commission. I've been doing that for a little while now.
Are you qualified for this position?
Yes, I'm certainly qualified. Aside from being a board-certified attorney in the state of Midlands, I've worked for the government in several positions, including being on the Board of Labor.
How did you get the position of Commissioner of the Midlands Gambling Commission?
I was appointed by the governor. My job doesn't involve any election from the public, but I still generally try to act in their best interests.
Why was this occupation religious for you?
Well, I do have some experience myself with gambling. It's not something I usually talk about because there's a really big stigma attached with gambling, and I'm a public servant, and so the opinion of the people matter to me, and so it's not really something I want to get out that I gamble, especially since it's gotten kind of bad in recent years.
Do you win often?
Well, like anyone who gambles, I win and I lose. Sometimes I win really big, but sometimes I also lose really big. And that takes a toll on me, and it's taken a toll on my sister as well, who lives with me. Sometimes I haven't treated her the way I was supposed to because I was really stressed out when I would have a losing streak or something like that.
I want to talk more about these winnings. If I were to show you a bank statement from April 20th, 2015, would you be able to recognize it?
Of course.
Your Honor, may I approach the bench and retrieve what has been already into evidence of, I believe, is State's Exhibit 2. This is the bank statement of Ms. Covington. Showing it both to counsel. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Covington, do you recognize what I just handed you?
Yes, this is my bank account statement.
Is it in the same condition or substantially the same condition as last time you saw it?
It appears to be, yeah.
Let's talk about some of the transactions on this statement, specifically the $155,000 deposit. Could you explain that to the court?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance. Response.
Your Honor, this document has been entered into evidence in the prosecution's case in chief. Mr. Keenan mentioned this document as a piece of evidence in which he corroborated with the vote on Mr. Bancroft's casino, and that is being offered as an example of the money that was given as a bribe. And I'm simply bringing forth this document to have Ms. Covington explain what the deposits were.
Your Honor, if I may, the deposit on April 6th is not relevant to today's case. We are here discussing whether or not she took a bribe. after the state had already occurred. So asking about April 6th and Ms. Covington's gambling is not relevant today.
In response to the specific entry on that date?
Yes, Your Honor. Specifically, the $155,000 deposit is a large sum of money. And by entering that sum of money into evidence, we're showing how Ms. Covington deals with large amounts of money that she wins at the Black Bear Casino and that she deposits in this bank account. If I may proffer, we will continue on and talk about the $200,000 deposit.
Prosecution, are you stating that this entry in her bank statement is not relevant and therefore shouldn't be admitted?
No, Your Honor. I'm just objecting to his line of questioning, delving deeper into this bank statement on that particular day.
Well, because it was entered by you, they have the opportunity to explain it. So
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Covington, could you explain for the court the $155,000 deposit?
Yes, I can. You see it, in the week before, I had taken out $100,000 and then also $50,000. I used that money to gamble, and at first I had lost a lot of it. And then I decided to play poker, which is my usual game. It's the one that I usually get lucky with. I was in a rough spot, so I decided to put all of the money I had left down, all the money I had taken out before. And luckily, I knew that my opponent was going to chase the flush in the hand that he had just been dealt. And whenever you chase the flush, you never win. It's just statistically unlikely. And so he ended up chasing the flush, and I ended up winning big. And luckily, I won all the money back, plus $5,000 that I had taken out. So I immediately entered all of that back into my bank account.
Could you tell the court about the $200,000 deposit?
Yes. This deposit, it was also from gambling. I was feeling really lucky after I won back all that money plus more. It's something that happens to gamblers a lot. When you win, you seek that thrill again, so you go back. And so I actually had some of the money, the extra that I won, and I took it back and I put it all down. And I just had a really lucky streak, and I was gambling with a lot of money, so it was really lucky that I won that back. And it says on the 17th, but that was actually the day before. It was pretty late at night, so the deposit didn't go through till the next day.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness and republish to the members?
Okay.
Ms. Covington, do you recall the day of April 6, 2015?
Yes, I do. That's the day that my commission released a memorandum to the public.
If I were to show you a copy of this memorandum, would you be able to identify it?
Of course, I was the one that checked over it.
Approaching the opposing counsel. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Ms. Covington, what have I just handed you?
You just handed me the memorandum that my office released regarding the new casino proposals for the newest license in Midlands.
Is it the same or substantially the same condition as the last time you saw it?
It appears to be, yes.
What does the seal at the top of the document mean?
Oh, that's the seal of the state of Midlands. It means that this is an official document released by a government office.
Your Honor, the defense moved into evidence would have been pre-marked as Exhibit 3 into evidence as Defense 3.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
So entered.
Ms. Covington, can you tell us about this first proposal?
Yes. The first proposal that we have on the memorandum was from Avery Bancroft, who's a local casino owner. In this proposal, Mr. Bancroft proposed a 71,000 square foot building. He proposed having 250 new job opportunities, as well as a $1 million donation to the community. It was a really great proposal, in my opinion.
What about this second proposal? Can you tell the court about that?
Yes, the second proposal was the only other one we received. It was from Shannon Stark in partnership with J.C. Longstreet. It actually proposed an overall smaller casino, and it didn't have the same financial assurance. You see, the co-proposal owner, J.C. Longstreet, actually had just had a failed business. His amusement park just had to shut down because they were selling expired food. And Shannon Stark had no business or management experience, and that really stuck out to me because you really need a lot of that to have a successful casino in Midlands, or any business for that matter.
Did this memorandum play a role in your decision process when determining between the two proposals?
Yes, this was the number one thing I looked at. What these two candidates were proposing, that's what was most important. And I really looked at what each person could give back to the community and the stimulus economically that they could bring to Midlands. I also looked at their experience and the rate of success that they might have based on prior experiences. And I also looked at how eager each one was to meet with me. I had reached out to Shannon Stark, but she never once responded or wanted to have any meetings with me, as where Avery Bancroft was very eager to meet with me as many times as I needed to get all the information.
Do you have a preference for one of the proposals?
Of course I did. Avery Bancroft was the obvious better proposal. It had the assured economic success. It had the job opportunities as well as that donation back to Midlands, which would really help our city. It was just obvious that Avery Bancroft would be the better one for the community.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness and publish the jury?
May.
Ms. Covington, you were in court today when the prosecution's case in chief went on.
Yes.
You heard when Mr. Keenan testified.
Yes, I did.
Mr. Keenan spoke about a napkin.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If I were to show you this napkin, would you be able to recognize it?
Of course.
Constructed napkin.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Covington, Mr. Keenan talked about this napkin being given to you on April 13, 2015.
Yes, I heard him say that earlier.
So, what did this napkin mean to you in that context?
We were actually talking about the amount of money it takes to start a casino building process in Midlands. You see, you have to have a license to begin work on any kind of construction project. And that license takes an initial amount of money that you have to put down in order to do that. And that amount of money varies based on the size of whatever you're building. Now, in this meeting, we actually had our cell phones and our pieces of paper taken away from us for some reason. So all we had to write down things on was a napkin that was brought in by a bellhop. So that's what we decided to write it on. Avery Bancroft and I were discussing how much it would take for him to put down to initially start this process to make sure that he had the right financial ability to be able to go through and have a successful casino.
After you heard Officer Keenan testify, we heard from Mr. Del Sesto.
Yes, we did.
Mr. Del Sesto claimed to see you leaving a meeting between yourself and Mr. Bancroft with Mr. Bancroft's briefcase on April 16, 2015.
Yes, I heard him say that, but I was really confused because I walked in with my briefcase and I left with my briefcase. I do have several briefcases, and not all of them look the same, but on that day I walked in with the one I had just bought, and I walked out with my same briefcase. He must have been confused. When I walked in, he squinted at me and looked really tired. He must have just somehow got mixed up.
After we heard from Mr. Del Sesto, your stepsister, Ms. Minettos, testified.
Yes, she did. I'm sure that's probably harsher.
I want to talk about what Ms. Minettos spoke to the court about. Specifically, she was the bartender for a meeting between you and Mr. Bancroft.
Yes, I had reached out to both Avery Bancroft and Shannon Stark to have initial startup meetings. And my sister was there at the one between me and Avery Bancroft. She really wanted to show off because she was in a hard time and needed a job. And she thought that if she showed off some good bartending skills, that she would maybe be considered for a job if Avery Bancroft was to get the casino. She planned on doing the same thing for Shannon Stark, but Ms. Stark never ended up responding to my office's emails for meetings.
Ms. Covington, I want to talk about some specific quotes that Ms. Minettos said, and I wrote them down to make sure I got them correctly.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Specifically, Ms. Minettos said, you said, whoever wins the proposal better have deep pockets.
Yes, and that's absolutely true. It takes a lot of money to not only start up a casino, but continue its upkeep and maintenance. Any big building project like that takes a lot of money to upkeep and start up. If somebody doesn't have the right amount of money to begin this project and continue it, the casino is sure to fail, which will just damage the economy of Midlands greatly, and that's not what I want at all.
Ms. Minotto went on to say that you said briefcases were the price of doing business. What did you mean by that?
You have to look professional, actually, when you're doing business. It's something me and all my colleagues do. We like to buy nice suits, carry nice briefcases, have nice pins. So it's not unusual for me to buy several briefcases. I have a lot of them at my place.
And lastly, did you accept a bribe from Mr. Bancroft for your vote for his casino?
Absolutely not. The only thing I took into consideration with this casino bid and proposal was what it could do for our community. That's all I care about, and that's what my job is.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination?
Yeah, sure. Ms. Covington, on your direct, you talked a lot about Mr. Bancroft's proposal.
Yes.
And you said that Mr. Bancroft proposed a bigger casino than Shannon Stark.
No, he actually proposed an overall bigger building complex. You see, his had a restaurant and a hotel as well as a concert venue attached to it.
Now, Ms. Stark's proposal also had a full-service salon and a sports bar, am I correct?
Yes, she did.
And Ms. Stark's proposal was estimated to bring bigger economic benefits to the state of Midlands.
You see, that's where you're wrong, Counselor. The economic benefits had not been calculated. Now, Ms. Stark tried to tell us that they would be bigger than Avery Bancroft's, but she really had no accounting, economic, or business background, so there was no backing up the statement that she put in her proposal, which is why we had to make sure that she said it was not calculated.
But she did expect them to be larger than Proposal 1, which was Avery Bancroft's proposal, correct?
Well, that's what she expected, yes, but that's not what me or the people on my commission believed with all of our experience working with the Midlands Gambling Commission.
Now, there's 3 people on your commission,
Yes.
and the other 2 don't like each other.
I wouldn't say they don't like each other, but they usually have different views on things.
They don't normally vote the same.
I wouldn't say that. There are times where they vote differently, but sometimes they vote the same. Everyone on my council, everyone on my commission just votes for what they think is right for Midlands. And sometimes we have different opinions, and that's really normal.
You were in court today when your sister, Miss Meadows, testified, correct?
Yes.
And she testified that you told her that they were voting against each other on this proposal.
I had heard, and we had some discussions, yes, about how we were going to vote. You see, one of my co-commissioners really believed that we should give the new person a new chance, despite there not really being any history to back up that they would have a successful casino. But my other commissioner agreed with me that we should go with what has already had success and what we know would have success, because we didn't want to take a chance with hurting the economics of Midlands.
Ms. Covington, I appreciate your answer, but that was a yes to my question. The 2 commissioners were not going to vote the same on this proposal.
Yes, I didn't believe so, and I'm sorry for elaborating. I just want to tell the whole truth today.
And you told your sister that whoever you voted for would win this proposal?
Well, it just depends. I thought so because I was the only one who hadn't decided yet, but you never know. You see, we all take the vote at the same time, so I have no way of knowing for sure whether or not my 2 commissioners will vote against each other. Me, like my fellow commissioners, just voted for who we thought would be the best for Midlands, and I stand by mine and my other commissioners' decisions.
Now, after you said this, you told Ms. Minetto that whoever you voted for would owe you a favor and could get her a job at their casino. Isn't that true?
Well, probably. That's the way it's worked in the past. We usually become pretty good friends after that, and I knew my sister needed a job, and she was more than qualified, and I knew that Avery would see that.
So, Ms. Covington, you did say that whoever you voted for would owe you big. Isn't that true?
Yeah, it's true. I helped them start up a casino, and I helped them for a long time after that, making sure that they're doing all of the milestones and doing everything correct to keep a nice running casino.
Now I'd like to move on to when you had Avery Bancroft over for dinner. You don't normally have people over for drinks, excuse me.
Oh, I didn't have anyone over for dinner.
I said drinks, excuse me, ma'am.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I usually don't have people over at my own place for drinks, but I make exceptions for important business meetings.
Now, at this meeting, I didn't write it down correctly, but you were talking to Mr. Bancroft, and he was willing to go the extra mile, isn't that true?
Yes, he was willing to do whatever it takes to be the best for Midlands. It's a very competitive thing when people are putting in proposals for casinos. They have to have the best, and that's how they win. And he was willing to go the extra mile to make sure his casino proposal and his casino was the best.
Now, I'd like to talk about December 13th. You were president, or April 13th, when you had a meeting with Mr. Bancroft.
Yes.
At this Bancroft, you said that the napkin had to do with how much it would cost to start up a business. Isn't that true?
Yes, that's completely true.
But you guys were sitting next to each other.
Yeah, we were.
You couldn't just say out loud, hey, it would cost $150,000 to start a casino.
No, we did say it out loud, but we also wrote it down to make sure that he could take it home and look at it and have that for his record so he had the numbers correct.
But he didn't take it home. You actually picked up the piece of paper and put it in your jacket pocket and left the meeting with that.
Yes, you see, I'm not actually the one who's in charge with calculating the exact amounts, so I took it back with me to make sure that I had told him the correct amount and that I would get back to him with the correct amount. And it did end up being correct, so that was the startup amount. I was a little confused at first, since it's not really my job to decide that, so I just wanted to be completely certain so everything went smoothly.
So, Ms. Covington, that's a yes to my question once again, that you actually picked up that napkin and took it home with you and did not give it to Mr. Bancroft?
Yes, I was the one that took it home. I had to check to make sure I wrote down the right thing to get back to him.
Now, on December 16th, you had a meeting scheduled with Mr. Bancroft.
My assistant, my auditor had told me that, but I didn't end up going to the one with everyone else. Me and Mr. Bancroft decided to meet separately.
You and Mr. Bancroft walked into the VIP room of the Black Bear Casino and sat down next to each other at a blackjack table.
Yes, I was actually running a little late, so Avery was in there first, and then I walked in second.
And you both were carrying briefcases.
Yes, it's pretty typical when I do business for me to carry a briefcase. When I'm just doing gambling in the casino, I don't really bring it because it's for business only. So I did bring it to this meeting because this was the final check that we were going to have to see if he had anything else to add to his proposal before we go.
But you don't normally do business in the VIP casino.
No, we don't, but we decided that day too. It was open and we enjoy a round of poker or blackjack, each of us, so it just seemed like a fun thing to do.
So you played one round of blackjack and then you left the casino.
Yes, he said he didn't have anything else to add to his proposal. He had told me everything that he could possibly do, so we just played one round and then I went to tell my fellow commissioners that there was nothing else left.
And after you left that round of blackjack carrying a briefcase, the next day you voted for Avery Bancroft's casino, isn't that correct?
Yes, I just talked to Avery Bancroft the day before to make sure that there was nothing new to be added. And then the next day, me and my commissioners voted. One other, opposed to myself, another person voted for Avery Bancroft, making it a 2-3 vote. So Avery Bancroft got the casino bid.
2-3 vote, Ms. Covington? There's only
Oh,
one
I'm so
single
sorry.
commission.
Out of 3 of us, 2 of us voted for Avery Bancroft. So it was 2-1, so the majority wins, and that's how our commission works.
And so that's a yes. After you met with Mr. Bancroft that day, you voted for his casino.
Yes, I did. It was the best one for Midland.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Are you here?
No, Your Honor, Ms. Covington's had a long day. We've asked that she
You are excused.
You guys have any further witnesses?
Your Honor, before the defense rests its case in chief, we renew our objection to State v. Owens to the establishment of a co-conspiracy between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft that was mentioned in your previous ruling about 2 hours ago.
All right, Ms. Moser, give us your argument for why sufficient foundation has been laid for these statements under 801
Your Honor, I think sufficient foundation has been laid throughout all of our witnesses, including all the meetings that Ms. Covington had with Mr. Bancroft, as well as not conversations they had, but things that took place during this meeting, in addition to the fact that it was established Ms. Covington was the swing vote on this casino bid, and that Mr. Bancroft was going to be the only person in Midlands to ever get a second casino. I think we have laid the foundation that there was a conspiracy here today.
Is there a certain standard by which you need to prove to show this foundation?
Yes, Your Honor. Like previously mentioned, it's only the preponderance of the evidence. So we don't have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, just more likely than not that there was a conspiracy, and I feel we have met that burden.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Specifically, State v. Owens was cited in 2 instances. First, with the conversation that occurred between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft. That was the conversation that established the following meetings that Ms. Moser just spoke about. In this discussion, we only see talking about a meeting to happen to discuss a proposal. And then the second time State v. Owens was referred to was specifically to the napkin, which was entered into evidence. We just heard from Ms. Covington talk about that napkin, and she said that that napkin was specifically used to write down the amount of money that the expected economic return of the casino would bring. There has been no establishment of a co-conspiracy between Mr. Bancroft and Ms. Covington to commit the act of bribery. We have heard about a napkin that was brought into evidence that has been disputed by Ms. Covington. There have been conversations between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft specifically about the proposals of the casino. Ms. Covington took the stand and spoke to us about why she voted for Mr. Bancroft's casino. We broke down the proposals, which proposals were better. There was no instances of showing that Ms. Covington did in fact pick up the briefcase that Mr. Del Sesto claimed to see her leave with on April 16, 2015. We've heard no forensic evidence showing that in fact Ms. Covington did in fact touch that briefcase. We only have eyewitness testimony establishing that that briefcase left the building with Ms. Covington. There has been no establishment of a co-conspiracy between Ms. Covington and Mr. Bancroft.
Your Honor, if I may. You may. We have laid the foundation. When it comes to that napkin, Mr. Keenan took the stand and testified today, and while I know that it's opposing counsel's contention that Ms. Covington got up there and testified about what actually happened with the napkin, Ms. Covington is on trial today. We've heard more than one account of that event, and I think that the accounts that we have heard have more than sufficiently laid foundation that there was a conspiracy.
I tend to agree, although the defense has given us alternative explanations, sufficient foundation has been laid for these statements to come in.
Yes, Your Honor.
So does the defense rest?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense rests its case in chief.
All right, do you want to break before closing arguments?
Yes, we do, Your Honor.
5 minutes.
Quick question before closing, Your Honor. For purpose of closing, should we talk about Ali Thomas, or was her testimony not on the record?